Hi, I'm Jan Owbridge. I head up the legacy generation at Lincoln Alive Central and Lincoln North. And I've been asked to just share a little bit about ministering, I guess, or helping the older generation in churches. Well, the first thing I want to say is that, the older generation is a growing generation. First of all, if you think about it, the older generation spans like a 40-year period. That's like a whole lifetime for some people. So the differences between people at one end of that scale and the other end of the scale could be massive. I mean, there's a big difference between a 95-year-old that, is feeling physically not in the prime of life, and a 60-year-old who is still working full-time and sprightly. So, but it's all considered to be the older generation. So what have I discovered in ministering to the older generation? Well, first of all, the perception in churches has been, certainly in my experience, has been wrong. First of all, the perception has been, you've done your time, and this is from the older generation's perspective. We perceive that the perception is, well, that's a bit convoluted, but you get where I'm coming from, that we've done our time is gone, our ministry's past, scrap heap. Shove them all into one little meeting and let them all get on with it, let them do their own thing. But really, they're not much good in church itself. Well, first of all, I want to stand up strong and shout out loud. That is not true. First of all, the Bible is very clear about the wisdom that's found in the older generation. And let's face it, a lot of you pastors are older generation, and nobody's put you on the scrap heap because you've got the title pastor, right? But general people in the church, look around at the ministries in your church. How many of the older generation are serving in those ministries? Or have they been kind of shunted to one side to make way for the younger generation? And don't get me wrong, I do believe that the younger generation have got to have space made for them. But how many of our churches do what is sensible to do and have the young ones come up alongside the older ones and learn and develop next to some wisdom? How many churches have that happen? Now, let me give you some of the benefits of having the older generation in your church, because let's face it, it's getting a bigger generation. First of all, the older generation are loyal. They've a lot of times been with you a long time, through thick and thin, through ups and downs, through splits and gatherings, whatever, and they're still there. They might have a grumble now and again, but they're still there. They still give into your offerings, and they're still ready to serve. And, I must admit, in our church, just thinking about it, you look at the worship team, all young people. Look at the children's ministry, all young people. Look at youth ministry, all young people. Look at the helps ministry, making tea and coffee, older generation. Why is that? Is it because that's all they're good for? No, it's because they're willing to serve in any position, in any place. Yet, many of them have got years and years and years of experience in other areas, but have not had the opportunity to be utilised in those areas. So have some thought, just in church. That's one area that I'd like to say. In church, give some thought about the older generation and what's on for them. What's going on for them? When we took over as the life pastors of Legacy, the older generation in our church, we made the decision that we were going to come with the message, God ain't finished with us yet. And encourage people to think that, or to realize that God's got something more for them. Also, I was reminded just this morning that some of the older generation have only just come to Christ. They didn't know Christ during their growing up years. They've come to Christ in their latter years. And so they're like newborns. They're new Christians, raring to go, wanting to be used for Jesus, wanting to do something for him, wanting to be used. Yet it's like, no, you're too old. Get over there. So the first thing I wanted to say is, let's change our perception of the older generation. Let's start seeing the older generation as a resource in our churches that we're underutilizing. Now, what about looking after them? Well, obviously, during lockdown, that generation is considered to be the most vulnerable. We set up in our church, we set up a calling team and visiting team. So during the lockdown itself, and of course now, we make phone calls every single week. I have a team of 7 people who have 5 people or 6 people on their list, and every single week they call them and have a chat to them. Some people it's a quick hello, how are you? Can I pray with you? Is there anything you need? And for some people it's a good old chinwag, because that's what they want. Now, some of them are older people making the calls and some are younger. But we've got this team of people that are taking it upon themselves to make these calls. Now, the older generation, for the most part, are the ones doing that because, of course, they have the time. That's another thing the older generation have, that a lot of times the younger ones don't. They have time. They can put aside time to do things. So they've been phoning and ministering to the older generation throughout lockdown. And then once we were able to go visit, we 2 of us went out every Friday, or Thursday or Friday, whichever, and afternoon, and visited 2 or 3 people, so that we could physically see them, have a cup of coffee, socially distanced across the lounge or in the garden, and they actually got to see somebody. So the older generation, they're very stoic. You know, the older, especially the slightly older ones who went through the war, their attitude is, we went through the war, we can cope with this, you know, this is nothing, we can handle it. Then you've got those who are fearful. So not everyone is the same. Some are fearful. What's going to happen? Am I going to get this? There's a lot of fear mongering in the media, and so they don't know. They're not. If they're isolated, they're not hearing anything except the news, and fear is being perpetuated. So we need to make sure that we bring a message of God is in control. And he's got this, and let's be at peace. We don't have to worry. No matter what the situation, we do what we're supposed to do. We keep the law, but we don't worry because God's got this thing. And so that's our kind of underlying message, is God's got this. But it's also just allowing them to talk. Do you know the older generation have got stories and things that they've done, and they're very active. A lot of them, the people I call every week, some of them are, you know, they're in their garden, they've got the greenhouse, they're planting and they're uprooting. Another lady is a dressmaker, and not just dresses, I mean, she's a seamstress, and she makes all kinds of stuff. She's taking up my dresses, thank God. But there's they have giftings within that group. There are giftings. One of the things that we like to do is to find out what people do. What are their hobbies? What's God saying to them? What testimonies have they got? And you would be amazed once you start encouraging the older generation to share. They've got things to share. They will share what God is saying to them, or what God's done in this past week or month or whatever it is. So in what we do when we're not in lockdown, we have a monthly meeting. And it's not a service in our particular situation, our location. It's not a service per se. It's a gathering of people to love Jesus and love one another and build relationships. It's very relational. I believe that the older generation want to have relationship with the younger generation. And we had started working in that area before the lockdown came, and wanting to do things where we could integrate the younger generation and the older generation. The older generation want to spend time with the younger generation, and a lot of the younger generation want to spend time with the older generation. So we'd already started working on that, and that's certainly something we want to look at for the future. It's not about segregation, it's about having everyone in the church working together and helping one another. The older generation could be asked, for example, to call sick people and pray for them. You know, if you've got a central point in your church where people who are sick contact, or they're in hospital, the older generation could phone them and pray with them and encourage them and motivate them. And again, during normal times, perhaps even go on hospital visits. I had a few people from our group that were doing that. They were visiting people in hospital. So there are lots of jobs that the older generation can do. Pray. They can pray. Some of them love to pray. And many of them have got wonderful ministry gifts. They can preach, they can teach, they can share, they can prophesy. Do they get opportunity in your church, or are they considered to be past it? That's really my message. It's that the older generation, they're people. We are just people. We want, do you know what? I don't really like hanging out with old people. You know, I say that because my friends, they're kind of, they're not old. In their heads, they're not old. I have people of all generations. Some of my best friends are younger than my kids, but I also have best friends who are older than me, but they're not old in their head. They're looking for God to do something fresh every single day. We talk and it's like, what's Jesus done for us? What is he saying? What's happening now? They're on fire for him. One of my friends has been on the mission field in her 70s twice. She's been out on the streets preaching and teaching and praying for the sick. And she's in her 70s, you know. So God's not finished with our generation yet. So the older generation in your church, talk to them and find out, what can you do? We do different stuff. We do have a preaching sometimes. Once a quarter we have someone come in from outside to bring a word. Once a quarter we raise people up within to share, maybe 2 or 3 people to give a short word or testimony, or some. We always have testimonies. Always have testimonies. Always want to celebrate what God's done. And then on once a quarter we go out. We'll have a barbecue or a lunch, or we'll go visiting somewhere. We've been to all kinds of places. Just go out as a group and fellowship and build relationships. So what's happening in your church for that older generation? Have you rethought your feelings, or you're thinking about the older generation, or are you just kind of putting them aside and thinking they're all right, they'll just get on with it? So I ran over, actually. I love being the age I am. I don't feel old. I didn't want to go to the old folks meeting because I didn't think I was old enough. But when we were asked to take it on a year or so ago, we decided that we would just bring youth into it instead of sucking life out of it. We wanted to change the name actually to Joy, Just Older Youth. So that's our tagline now. We're the legacy generation for just older youth. And that's it. We're just older, but inside our youth is being renewed like the eagles. So hopefully that's kind of given you a little bit of direction as to what we do with the older generation, and what can be done with the older generation. And God bless you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.